What if everything you've ever genuinely longed for, the deep partnerships, the financial freedom, the radiant health, the actual life you romanticize, was already sitting right here in the present moment, waiting for you to notice? What if the only thing standing between you and your desires is simply not realizing they already belong to you? Back in 1952, a quiet thinker and mystic named Neville Goddard put out a short, unassuming volume titled The Power of Awareness. It didn't blow up overnight. There were no celebrity shout-outs, no high-budget ad campaigns, just 15 brief chapters. Yet, across the decades, it has completely rewired the trajectories of millions. Self-made entrepreneurs, artists, everyday people who spent years banging their heads against invisible brick walls. They all point back to this exact piece of work. So what makes these pages carry such weight? Is it high-level philosophy, a spiritual awakening, or modern psychological hacking? The truth is, it's a mix of all three, and yet none of them. Neville wasn't trying to hand you another rigid belief system to tie you down. He was passing you a direct mechanism, a method so bare bones and straightforward that it almost feels insulting when you first encounter it. But the second it truly clicks in your mind, your entire perspective shifts permanently. Over the next few minutes, we're going to break down the actual mechanics of awareness. We'll translate the core lessons into plain, everyday language and back them up with real-world scenarios so you can actually apply this stuff rather than just nodding along intellectually. Get comfortable. This might just be the most important stretch of time you invest in yourself all week. The Power of Awareness contains 15 chapters, and many of them are barely a couple of pages long. But don't let the short length trick you. Every single sentence was chosen with absolute precision. Neville was a master of trimming the fat. He didn't waste a single word. Here is the entire framework of the book condensed into one single paragraph, and we will spend the rest of our time unpacking it piece by piece. You are the ultimate creative source. Consciousness is the only true reality. Whatever you are acutely aware of being in this exact moment is what you are actively turning into. You don't attract what you want out there. You naturally become whatever you assume yourself to be on the inside. That's the whole framework. But figuring out what those words actually demand of you is where the real journey starts. First, we'll look at Neville's foundational anchor, the concept of I am. We'll unpack why it is arguably the most potent phrase in human communication. Next, we'll dive into the law of assumption, his core teaching that assumptions, once felt as undeniable truth, eventually harden into physical facts. We'll examine the heavy lifting done by genuine feeling, moving far past generic positive thinking. We'll discuss the necessity of persistence because Neville makes it clear that this isn't a quick one-night hack. And finally, we'll explore what he calls no other God, the bold, radical conclusion that the entire philosophy builds toward. By the time we wrap up, you won't just have a nice summary, you'll have an actual daily practice you can start tonight. Chapter 1. The Infinite Being. Neville kicks off the book with a statement that makes most people freeze up. I am is the literal name of the creative source. Not I am a person, not I am John or I am Sarah, just I am, pure unshaped existence itself. He pulls this directly from the biblical story of Exodus, where Moses asks God what title he should use, and the reply comes back, "Tell them I am sent you." Neville stresses that this was never meant to point toward some distant figures sitting in the clouds. It was a direct description of your own consciousness, of pure awareness. You don't possess consciousness, you are consciousness. And that deep sense of I am is what builds everything you encounter in your daily life. The I am experiment. Here is a quick way to actually feel what Neville is talking about. Close your eyes for a second. Drop your name. Drop your career title. Drop your physical location. Just sit quietly with the raw sensation of existing. That quiet, steady hum of knowing you are here. That is what Neville is pointing toward. Not your racing thoughts. Not your past memories, just raw, unclouded awareness. Notice how that awareness isn't stressed out, it isn't exhausted, and it isn't panicked. It simply is. Now finish the sentence, I am, and add a modifier. I am broke. I am exhausted. I am completely unloved. Notice how the instant you attach a negative label after those two words, your physical body reacts. Your mood tanks and your posture caves. That's the exact mechanism Neville is exposing. Whatever you tack on to I am, you immediately breathe life into. Chapter 2. Consciousness is the only reality. In the second chapter, Neville drops his most controversial claim. He argues that there is no independent external world out there, or rather, the physical world is nothing more than your own consciousness rendered visible. The desk sitting right in front of you, the balance in your checking account, the dynamic of the relationship you're currently in or wishing for. All of it is a direct projection of your internal state. He writes that the world is simply yourself pushed outward. He isn't speaking in poetic metaphors, he means this literally. Your internal assumptions about who you are, the quiet, unspoken beliefs you hold about your worth and your limits, are continuously and automatically shaping what shows up on your doorstep. Chapter 3. The Power of Assumption. Chapter 3 introduces the engine of the entire philosophy. If consciousness is the absolute reality, what decides which version of reality you experience? Neville's answer is simple: your assumptions. An assumption isn't just a casual hope or a daydream. An assumption is something you completely take for granted, a premise you accept as so fundamentally true that you don't even question it anymore. Right now, you have dozens of background assumptions running quietly. I'm just not naturally talented at money. Good relationships always end up complicated. I always get overlooked. These hidden assumptions, because you feel them as facts, are silently steering your daily life. Chapter 4. All Things Are Possible. Neville opens Chapter 4 with a line that will either excite you or terrify you. There is zero limit to what you can be, achieve, or experience. He isn't trying to pump you up with generic motivational speaker hype. He's making a hard metaphysical statement. If your internal state is the direct cause of your external reality, and there is no ceiling on what consciousness can decide to assume, then there are literally no boundaries. The only walls you face are the ones you've agreed to accept as true. But the best part is that you can rewrite those agreements at any time. The ladder experiment. Neville actually gave his students a very specific test for this chapter, which has since become famous as the ladder experiment. Here is how it works. Tonight, before you drift off, try to convince yourself that the physical action of climbing a ladder is completely impossible for you, totally out of the question. Hold that restriction in your mind as you fall asleep. Then, tomorrow night, do the exact opposite. Vividly imagine yourself stepping up a ladder, feeling the hard wooden or metal rungs pressing into your palms, experiencing the upward motion. Fall asleep right inside that mental scene. The point of this isn't about ladders at all. The point is to prove to yourself through direct personal testing that your nighttime assumptions heavily influence what pops up in your waking life. A large number of Neville's students reported that after just a few nights of this exercise, ladders started showing up in the most random places, painters working on a building downtown, an emergency fire escape they had walked past 100 times without noticing, as if the physical world was suddenly echoing their assumption back to them. You are the laboratory, and you are the lead scientist. Chapter 5. Clarify your desire. Before you can successfully assume something into physical form, you have to get completely clear on what you actually want. That sounds obvious, but Neville devotes a whole chapter to it, because most people operate with muddy, contradictory wishes. They want financial abundance, but deep down they believe wealthy people are corrupt. They want a committed relationship, but they secretly believe they are difficult to love. These inner contradictions completely cancel each other out. Neville's advice is to get hyper-specific. Stop saying, "I want more financial breathing room," and start stepping into the identity of the person who lives in that specific space, drives that vehicle, and handles money with total ease. The more precise and sensory-rich your desire is, the easier it is for your consciousness to organize around it. Chapters 6 and 7. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This is where the book hits its absolute core. Chapters 6 and 7 are easily the most critical sections in the entire work. Neville introduces the exact phrase that would define his legacy. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Pay close attention to what he doesn't say. He never tells you to just visualize a picture. He never tells you to repeat empty positive affirmations. He tells you to feel. Because your subconscious mind, the part of you that actually does the heavy lifting of creation in Neville's system, doesn't respond to static images or logical words. It responds directly to feeling, to the emotional baseline of your inner world. The technique is simple. Close your eyes. Imagine that you already possess what you're longing for. Don't watch yourself from a distance like you're watching a movie about someone else. Step right inside the experience. What would you physically see from that perspective? What sounds would surround you? Who would you be talking to, and what would they be saying? Let the genuine feelings of relief, deep gratitude, and naturalness flood your system. Hold on to that state. This isn't just mindless daydreaming, it is precise mental instruction. Chapter 8. Imagination is the Redeemer. Neville drew heavy inspiration from the English poet and mystic William Blake. In this chapter, he leans into Blake's most famous concept, Imagination isn't just a tool we pick up and put down. Imagination is what we fundamentally are. He writes that imagination is the redemptive power living inside every human being. What does that mean in practical terms? It means your capacity to picture a better reality and actually feel it as a present fact isn't some rare skill you have to spend years developing. It's your default birthright. You aren't trying to mutate into something foreign. You are simply trying to remember what you already were before the world cluttered your mind. The SATS technique. Neville's most widely used practical method is called SATS, which stands for State Akin to Sleep. Here is the step-by-step breakdown. Step 1. At night, when you're tucked into bed, let your body completely unwind. Allow your limbs to feel heavy and breathe at a slow, steady pace. You want to drift into that heavy, drowsy borderland between being fully awake and actually falling asleep. Step 2. Construct a very brief, vivid scene that acts as undeniable proof that your desire has already materialized. Don't focus on the stressful process of getting it. Focus entirely on the aftermath. For instance, if you're looking for a career change, don't replay the awkward job interview. Imagine telling a close friend, "I actually got the position," and feel the firm grip of their handshake or the genuine warmth in their voice. Step 3. Loop that short scene over and over again like a repeating GIF until you drift off into deep sleep. Step 4. Let go and trust. Stop anxiously scanning your environment the next morning looking for proof. Plant the mental seed and let your deeper mind handle the architecture. Neville called sleep the literal gateway to the subconscious. The moments right before you drift off are when the barrier between your conscious analytical mind and your deep subconscious is at its absolute thinnest. That is when your assumptions sink in the deepest. Chapters 9 and 10. Attitudes and Revision. Chapter 9 tackles what Neville labels attitude, which is distinct from a temporary desire. An attitude is your default emotional posture toward life, toward yourself, and toward what you believe is possible for you. He argues that before you can successfully manifest specific goals, you have to take a hard look at the underlying attitude fueling those goals. Someone whose default internal stance is, "I am fundamentally unworthy," will keep running into endless disappointments, not because the universe is keeping score against them, but because their core assumption is simply doing what assumptions always do, reproducing itself. Chapter 10 introduces one of Neville's most comforting practices, revision. At the end of every day, he suggests taking just 5 minutes to mentally replay the day's events and rewrite any interaction that went sideways. Did you stumble through a conversation? Revise it in your mind. Imagine yourself handling it with total grace and confidence. Did unexpected bad news throw off your mood? Revise it. See the situation resolving smoothly. Instead, this isn't childish denial, it's conscious authorship of your internal narrative, which over time completely alters your external reality. The revision practice. Here is how you can use revision in the real world. Say you had an important presentation at work today and you completely froze up, leaving the room feeling embarrassed and defeated. Tonight, before you close your eyes, replay that exact presentation. But this time, see yourself speaking with absolute clarity. Watch the room leaning in, completely engaged with your points. Hear the applause and feel the wave of relief wash over you. Hold that emotional texture. Does this magically alter the physical history of what happened earlier? Neville would argue that the past is simply whatever was assumed back then, while the future is shaped by what you assume right now. By revising the memory, you change the emotional footprint of the event, which is the exact mechanism that dictates what comes next. Chapter 11. The Pruning Shears of Revision. Chapter 11 serves as Neville's deep dive into the mechanics of revision, making it one of the most practically useful sections of the book. He writes that the single most important habit you can build is reviewing your day each night before bed and pruning away the negative impressions. He calls revision your pruning shears because just like an experienced gardener cuts away dead branches to clear the path for fresh spring growth, revision snips away the sting of today's frustrations before they can take deep root in your subconscious and bloom into tomorrow's obstacles. Chapter 12. Persistence. By the time you work your way through the first dozen chapters, you understand the Korn method. The natural question Neville addresses next is, what are you supposed to do when nothing in your physical environment seems to be changing at all? His answer is blunt: persist. He writes that the ultimate secret to success is locking on to your desired state and refusing to let go. Most people drop the practice not because the law doesn't work, but because they panic the second physical reality pushes back. The past due bill arrives, the relationship hits a rough patch, a door slams shut, and they throw their hands up shouting, "See, it was all fake." But Neville counters that this exact moment of friction is when you have to hold your ground. The outer physical world always operates with a delay compared to your internal shift. The bridge of incidents. Neville uses the term bridge of incidents to explain the phase between planting an internal assumption and seeing it show up in the physical world. The moment you genuinely commit to a new identity, reality quietly starts constructing a bridge to bring that state into form. A random conversation sparks up, an old contact reaches out, a book falls off a shelf, or a brilliant idea drops into your head. These aren't random coincidences, they are the planks of the bridge being laid down. Think of it like dropping a seed into dark soil. The seed doesn't sprout into an oak tree overnight, but underneath the dirt, away from prying eyes, everything is already moving at full speed. Persistence means trusting the growth happening beneath the surface long before you can see the green shoots. One of Neville's students wrote to him explaining that she had faithfully kept up her SATs practice for 30 days straight without a single visible shift. His response was simple: keep going. By day 40, she received a random phone call from an acquaintance that directly handed her the exact career opportunity she had been visualizing. The bridge was under construction the entire time. She just hadn't looked far enough down the road. Chapters 13 and 14, Failure and a Summary of the Law. Chapter 13 takes a refreshingly honest look at why people sometimes fail when using this method, and his explanations are surprisingly grounded. He doesn't lecture people about lacking willpower. Instead, he points to 3 specific traps. First, deep-seated doubt. Not just the surface worry of, is this going to work, but the underlying assumption that you aren't the kind of person who gets to experience good things. Second, a rigid attachment to the means. Most people don't just want their goal, they demand that it arrive through a very specific door on a very specific timeline. When that specific door stays locked, they lose their faith. But Neville reminds us that your only job is to assume the final outcome. The logistics are none of your concern. Third, inconsistency. Running the mental scene of your wish fulfilled for 10 minutes right before bed, and then spending the entire next day complaining and worrying is like trying to fill a bathtub with a drain wide open. Your mental diet has to remain steady. Chapter 14 wraps up the core teachings cleanly. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, and simply watch where your natural attention drifts. Notice what kind of thoughts start bubbling up, and pay attention to which actions suddenly feel effortless. Let your new internal assumption guide your steps, rather than trying to force every single outcome with sheer exhaustion. Chapter 15. No Other God. The final chapter is arguably the most radical. If anything Neville has said up to this point has made you slightly uncomfortable, this chapter pushes the envelope even further. He writes that there is no supreme authority or divine force separate from your own magnificent human imagination. Neville isn't trying to be irreverent, he is being precise. In his reading of the ancient texts, the divine was never an external entity looking down from the heavens to judge your worth or hand out random lottery tickets of fate. It was always a metaphor for your own awareness. The kingdom of heaven isn't a geographical location. It is an internal state of mind, and you are the one holding the keys to the front door. This realization is simultaneously the most liberating and the most terrifying concept in the book. If there is no external judge steering your ship behind the scenes, who is actually responsible for your circumstances? You are. Here is your simple blueprint for tonight. Before you drift off to sleep, not while scrolling through your phone, not while multitasking, give yourself 5 quiet minutes. Sit still and ask yourself, if I already possessed what I long for most, how would my physical body feel right now? Find that emotional texture. Don't force it or strain your mind. Just let it settle in naturally, and let yourself drift off to sleep right inside that feeling. That's all there is to it. Just for tonight, just once. See what shifts. Because Neville believed, and I am convinced he was right, that awareness isn't something you have to grind to earn or prove yourself worthy of. You simply have to claim it. You simply have to assume it. And the moment you do, everything in your world begins to move.